Usually the most challenging panel, right after lunch. I'll do my best to keep it lively and engaging, and I will not hesitate to cut people off if you're using or disguising speeches in the form of comments. Okay, so you're warned. These past 5 years for me, probably for many of you, have been quite exciting, watching these nationalist, populist movements, a rebellion really around the world, challenging and going head-to-head against the administrative, therapeutic, thieving and taxing state. I think it's been very good and very exciting. This has focused attention on sovereignty movements, sovereigntism, and the general concept of sovereignty in general. As I started looking with growing interest in these movements, I started doing research, and I found, much to my surprise, that in recent decades, there's not been much in terms of academic research on sovereigntism or sovereignty. In fact, some of the more recent treatments of the concept, of the idea, have come from Italy. Francesco, my dear friend, has published at least two, one for Marco Gervasoni, and the other one, a collection of essays by Paolo Becchi. I recommend them to you if you read Italian, although we must get them translated soon. The other one is by Giuseppe Valditara on sovranismo. But you really have to go back to 1966 to F.H. Hinsley, a Cambridge Don, I believe, who wrote a very charming, very rigorous treatment of sovereignty, going back to Rome, through Byzantium, looking at Jean Baudin, Hobbes, Grotius, and it's really great stuff. Thankfully for you, our time is limited. We're not going to get into that kind of material. But it's very interesting, and I recommend it to you highly. Now, I have a reputation as being provocative, and let me throw out this one definition of sovereignty that I pulled from the books, and it's from Carl Schmitt. Sovereignty is the power to decide whether or not to take action, whether or not to initiate a state of exception. He says, the nation state is that political form that joins sovereignty, this abstract power, with peoplehood, with those local traditions and customs. They come together in sovereignty, in the nation state, culminates in the nation state. And that, he says, is a hallmark of European civilization, which I think most of us are here to defend in one form or another. Now, in other words, what he wrote was that without a strong national identity, which is rooted in the local, in the folk, in the customs and traditions of local regions and communities, sovereignty means little. Now, lest you think that it's only beyond the pale thinkers like Schmitt that think this way or conceive of sovereignty in this way, I bring your attention to the Declaration of Paris, the Paris Declaration of 2017, a fascinating little document signed by about 24 leading intellectuals, classical liberals and conservatives, including Professor Legutko, Dalmacio Negro Pavon, the late Roger Scruton, and others. And they have a similar understanding of what sovereignty is all about and the role of the nation state. Now, all that is just to introduce this concept and give you a little bit of background. The various concepts and ideas I've already mentioned, identity, identity movements, nationalism, even populism, I know they're scary on their own, and people like Karen Horn in the past at the Mont Pelerin Society have warned vociferously against populism. But when you combine them, when you combine them into a compact or a package, they can be very useful. Our task as people who cherish freedom above all, ordered liberty, is to make sure that none of these different movements, none of these disparate movements like populist groups or identitarians or nationalists devolve into cruder forms. Our task is to bring them together so that we can all together defend the nation state in whatever form that takes, and together defend national sovereignty in whatever form it takes, because it has to be rooted in the local traditions of each country. Now, here we have a very interesting panel. Anna represents, as you know, Poland, but also the United States. I could say that, right, Anna? The queen of both. The queen of both. Ádám, Hungary, and Francesco, Italy. Each, in their own way, is involved with some form of national sovereignty, movements, intellectual or political, And so let's get this conversation started, okay? Let's talk about the threats to national sovereignty. And I conceive of the threats in various ways. There are threats from above and threats from abroad. Let's start with the obvious one, the elephant in the room, the EU or the supranational organizations, the multilateral bureaucracies that John Fonte talks about. Let's start perhaps on the far end and work towards Anna. Francesco, EU, still a threat, or is there something greater beyond the EU? I can't conceive of what that might be, but please.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you very much for your invitation, and congratulations for this great event. It's going to be a very interesting conference today and also tomorrow, so thank you for your invitation. The topic that we are talking about today is quite an important topic. I have to say that the concept of sovereignty and the debate about national sovereignism was a debate more, maybe not, I don't want to say important, but more talk in the media and in the public debate before COVID. I think that the European election in 2019 was the moment where, all over Europe, the people and the media and the political landscape talk about national sovereignty. Now, unfortunately, the topic is not so popular, but is a topic of the present, and especially is the topic of the future, is the topic of the next year. I don't think that the European Union is at all a problem for the concept of the national sovereignism, but there are some parts of the European Union that probably are against the concept of the national states. The first thing is that we have to create a separation between the concept of Europe and the concept of European Union. The concept of Europe is a cultural concept, is an historical concept. When we talk about Europe, we talk about also a European identity. Europe is Dante, Europe is Goethe, Europe is maybe Cervantes. There are a lot of important writers, there are a lot of important intellectuals and people who made Europe. And the concept, the idea of the European Union is a political idea. So when we talk about a political concept, when we talk about a political idea as European Union, we can criticize it. And we have to criticize when the European Union don't follow some rules. And when we talk about the European Union, we have to talk about, first of all, the Treaty of Rome. In 1950, the idea of the European Union was made by three important leaders, Adenauer, Schuman, and De Gasperi. These three leaders were Christian leaders, and this is very important. So the idea of the European Union is a Christian idea. But after that, we had other two important treaties, the Treaty of Lisbon and the Treaty of Maastricht. And in the Treaty of Lisbon and in the Treaty of Maastricht, the cultural idea of Europe was destroyed. And the European Union that we have now is a European Union based on economic values. So until the 2008, the economic situation was good all over Europe. Everyone was happy about the European Union. And the Italian people, for example, were a very enthusiastic pro-European people. But after that, we remember the problem with Greece, we remember what happened also with Italy, with Spain, with Portugal, and everything changed. And everything changed also in 2015 with the famous crisis of migrants. So what is happening today is that we have two opportunities for the future. On one side, we have the idea of the United States of Europe. So more centralization in Brussels, so a stronger Europe. On the other side, we have another idea that I think that we have to follow as conservative people. And the second idea is the idea of the Europe of nations. So a Europe that is confederate. And when we talk about sovereignty, we have to underline that sovereignty is so important in the present and also in the future, also because of what happened with the COVID. And I want to underline three things. One thing is not directly linked with the concept of sovereignty, but with COVID, we understand some important things. First of all, we understand the importance of the spirituality. We born in a society that unfortunately is made on the French Revolution values. So we born in the society that is made on the concept of materialism, on the concept of rationalism, where we think that the man is invincible, where we think that we don't need God because we are some very important and invincible people. But with the COVID, we understand that we are not invincible. And we understand how is important the concept of the spirituality. Everyone saw the picture of the Pope praying during Easter last year in Piazza San Pietro with his white dress, and it was a quite impressive image. But it's not directly linked with the concept of national sovereignty. What is linked with the concept of national sovereignty, and what we understand because of the COVID, is that we need national states. I make you the example of our country, of Italy. We are the 7th economy in the world. We are a country of the G7, but when COVID arrived, and you know that unfortunately COVID arrived in a strong way in Italy last year. We were the first country in Europe where COVID spread all over the country. And when many people die every day in our country, we didn't have masks. And we only have one industry in all the country who produce ventilator. So we didn't have ventilator, we didn't have mask, because we import all these kind of things. And so we understand how it's important for a nation to have some internal industry in strategic sector. We understand how it's important to have some strong strategic sector, and we understand that the globalization has probably some good things, but also some not good things, and we must have some national security system. And in the third point that I want to underline, and I'm going to finish, is that we understand also how it's important to have a strong nation, for example, in the health system. Who helped our citizens in the moment of difficulty wasn't the European Union. We asked for an help to European Union. Unfortunately, they didn't reply in the first situation. After that, after a few weeks, the situation changed. Unfortunately, COVID spread all over Europe, and so they changed their mind. But we remember in the first day when we asked help to the European Union, and who helped our citizens was the national health system. And we understand, and all the people, not only the conservative, understand also the importance of the national identity. I remember that all over the country there were Italian flags in all the house, outside the house, and I remember that people sung during the curfew the national hymn. And it was, for us, something unbelievable, because unfortunately we lost many years ago the concept of the patria. We use this word in Italy. So the concept of national sovereignty is quite important, and I think that the COVID explained us how it's also important today to fight for a national, not only identity, but for a national sovereignty.
Excellent comments, and I'm glad you mentioned globalization. If time permits, we'll come back to that, because I certainly see it as one of those external threats, some of these global economic actors, but we'll come back to that if time permits, like I said. And before I get to Ádám, you also channeled Santiago Abascal, one of the great leaders of Spain, who said, the oligarchs in Brussels, this is a quotation from an essay we published last year, the oligarchs in Brussels are creating an EU that is coercive, which in no way reflects the spirit of cooperation characteristic of the founding fathers, as you said. Ádám, your country has a unique relationship with the EU. Could you elaborate on this and how the EU might be a threat to national sovereignty?
This question is so important and amazing, so thank you very much. And I want to talk about this topic too. But firstly, thank you for the invitation. It is an honor to be here, and it is an honor not just because I sit next to acknowledged professionists on Francesco and of course Mr. Fantini. It is an honor because this conference and the event, even better than I expected, so thank you for the organizers too. Thank you for invite to. Actually I prepared a few thoughts and opening remarks for the event, and during my flight from Budapest to Portugal, actually I started to read this book again, because it will be a guest for our panelist partners. It's about Viktor Orbán and the underground narrative. The title is the book. And so I started to read it, and I found a very good phrase for here. So if I may, I read just 30 seconds or 1 minute. And it can be a good answer for your question too, so thank you for your question.
So you're channeling Viktor Orbán?
Yeah,
okay,
I hope so.
We'll allow that.
In the eyes of foreigners, we Hungarians are strangers. Everyone in the world calls our country Hungary. We call it the land of Magyars, called in Hungarian Magyarország. Although we live here in Europe as Europeans, our language still is isolating us. Our greatest treasure is the language that only we speak. This book wants to change that. I want to teach you a little Hungarian. For Hungarians, the illiberal state is the Diet Coke of democracy, same taste, no calories. In Hungarian, the literal meaning of liberal arts would mean works of art created by a person with liberal political views. Liberal arts is called bölcsészettudomány, it's a very easy word in Hungarian, literally the science of wisdom. In Hungarian, liberal democracy means the country is ruled not by law, but by parties with liberal views. If someone asks your political views and your answer is liberal, they probably think you are a weed-smoking hippie, or at least a wannabe. We translate the word liberty in Hungarian to szabadság, with the literal meaning of freedom, with a positive upbeat. In short, for the majority of Hungarians, liberal is prejudice, freedom is positive. So what I want to say is, if we want to talk about national sovereignty, I think firstly we need to understand our language. First we need to know each other, we need to accept and respect our common history, unique history, and after that we can talk about national sovereignty. And I have some thoughts about a little story from my childhood or my teenage life, and it can be an answer for your question again. So if I want to talk about national sovereignty or the Hungarians or maybe the Central Eastern Europeans people attitude to the independence or to freedom, firstly I'd like to be honest with you and want to share a story. When I started to prepare for this panel conversation, I realized I am not so confident with my English, so I started to think about my first experience or my first meeting with English language. And I realized my first, second, third, or fourth English teachers were former Russian teachers. And maybe it's not a unique story. So from our region and that time, and I am 28 years old now. I was born after the system change, but it sounds funny. I have a kind of experience, not to living under constant control, but I have some experience. Because I can find after 30 years after the system change, I can find many remains from the recent communist socialist past, like architecture, educational system, cultural life, the old communist elite rolling in the public life, and so on. And after 30 years, we are still working hard to rebuild or renew our society, rebuild or renew our nation from this darkest communist past. So what I want to say in the context of national sovereignty, us Hungarians, and maybe I can talk on the behalf of the Central Eastern European people too. The national sovereignty is a very sensitive and a very important part of our life and our history too. It's because of our history. We have a lot of experience what it means to live under constant control, under oppressions. And I'm not just talking about our recent past, but our long and common history as well. So if I want to talk clearly and honestly about national sovereignty, we need to respect and understand and accept each other country's unique history. And I have some Hungarian ideas, and Hungary received what it means to Hungarians, but maybe your turn.
Maybe we can come back to that. But you're talking about the peoplehood that I mentioned, you know, those local traditions, mores, mers.
Yes.
Anna, please.
And sorry, maybe Anna had a kind of radio interview last year, so you have a similar, with the Hungarian radio. So.
I don't speak Hungarian, so I have no idea how it worked out after it was translated, so I don't want to say.
Maybe you need the microphone because it was important also.
Is it working? Yeah?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Okay, so I think that Francesco, you said so many things I would have wanted to say, so that's great. I won't speak for... No, I don't think so. I think we're just, like-minded, that there is such a possibility. But the issue of sovereignty and national or post-national Europe, first of all, we do seem to have struggle for sovereignty going on the continent, but to say that the aspirations of the European Union is to be a post-national state, I think it's not true, even though that is the narrative that we're hearing. I think we really have a Europe of, and forgive me, this is going to be crude, but we don't have much time, so I can make it more sophisticated when we sit over coffee or something. But it really is a Europe of vassals and hegemons. And some supervisors that have maybe a little more leeway than those who should behave like vassals. What is interesting is that there are different traditions meeting in Europe. There is Poland and Hungary now on a very definite, not nice member state list in Brussels. And there is the Anglo tradition, and the UK and the US, which because of NATO is in some ways not insignificantly present in European politics. And the attitude towards the US, I think, also defines the Europeans and various European countries. The thing about Poland and Hungary, we have a history that actually, we have a friendship that goes back 600-700 years. The same royal house had the throne in both places. I was talking to some friends over lunch, and it's an interesting thing, but by the 14th century, the Poles and Hungarians figured out that a woman can be crowned a king. It's really not a problem. She will just get a title of the king. Everybody will know that the throne is not up for grabs, and a girl could in fact be called a king and still remain a woman, have a husband, and then have a union with Lithuania and become the biggest state in Europe and serve as a bulwark of Christianity against the Mongols and then the Ottomans. So it worked out actually quite well for Europe. And then even save the country at Vienna that will later come and partition you in gratitude, not quite 90 years later. At the same time, Poland was also a country that was electing its kings, had a at first functional and then extremely dysfunctional parliament, but it was a democracy of the nobility. And freedom was something that the Poles cherished for many, many hundreds of years. The UK and US tradition, US tradition, because it's an Anglo tradition, I think it's a little bit similar. Magna Carta and the Bill of Rights is something that predates any liberation movements in Europe, and it's and it's quite important, of course, because both the UK and the US identify with it, and I think it probably informed the decision of the UK to eventually leave. Now, why is it important? Because the hegemons in Europe, I think without a doubt, is, well, above all Germany, the economic powerhouse of Europe, but also France. France for its revolution and a conviction that that revolution is in fact the pattern that Europe should follow for liberation and for freedom. It's of course not the kind of liberation that part of Europe, that the other part of Europe would like. And Germany, I feel, is there to tell the rest of Europe that, well, trust us, nationalism is no good. Yeah, what they did wasn't good. Most of Europe didn't like it, didn't enjoy it. It's not an example to follow. But what Germany practiced was Nazi imperialism. I mean, killing all your neighbors isn't really nationalism. And this is, I think that this is really sort of the tension that's currently in Europe. Interests of a particular country, Germany, that also happens to have a very dominant role in the European media, that happens to be a hub for almost all the infrastructure, for transport, for energy, which of course includes the Nord Stream 2 project that happens to have, Russian gas flow into Germany from where it would be distributed to the rest of Europe, which also means that NATO probably would be powered by Russian energy. And the rest of Europe really just doesn't like it. And if we have a Europe of nations, which I think is the only sustainable way for the European Union to survive, I don't think it is possible that the Europeans will simply roll over, even those who don't want to speak up. I think even the Dutch will get sick and tired of it. I mean, you know, Mr. Verhofstadt can immigrate to Berlin or Frankfurt or something in a pinch. I think the real issue is that it is not a post-national Europe. It is a Europe where Brussels pursues interests of the most powerful member, and where the other hegemon provides the culture of equality and liberation as it was defined by an extremely bloody event in the 18th century. And because the Soviet Union fell, nobody has to really explain anymore. Nobody has to hide and talk about and own up to the fact that revolutions are not all good. Because 1917, the gulags, I mean, that was all looming until 1989. That's way too recent a past. 18th century is a long time ago, and we can all pretend that that is how liberation is done. You march, you call people out, you redefine the words, you call freedom something that isn't, you call equality something that isn't, and you simply kill everybody in between. And I think that, I mean, this is a bit cartoonish, but I think this is the situation that Europe is currently dealing with, that we have countries that refuse to be vassals with old traditions, who very much feel like a part of Europe that's built on the Bible, Old and New Testament, Athens and Rome. Rome, both the Roman Rome and Rome as in the Vatican City. And what comes in is precisely what the French Revolution ushered in, which was anti-Christian, anti-God, anti-human dignity, and feeding envy and vengeance as a way for a society to interact. I don't think it will work.
Boy,
Sorry.
Tell us how you really feel.
I know.
Thank you for that.
I'll
Ádám.
do it
That was
after.
excellent. You were channeling Remy Bragg and Russell Kirk and several others. Ádám, very quickly, if you get beyond the EU, putting aside the EU, which admittedly is difficult since it's got its little tentacles and everything, putting aside the EU, is there a greater threat to national sovereignty, at least from the Hungarian perspective? Greater threat than the EU? Whether it's
Yes.
a governmental or a private sector kind of threat?
Yeah, so I am in the easy situation because the previous guy, I can just agree with you, all of you. And what I can see, the same thing than Francesco. So if we are talking about the context of the European Union or the future of this whole community, I can see two different ways too. Like the Christian conservative way and the progressive liberal way maybe, which is an absolutely different views of our future. So,
sorry, just to clarify, are you
Yes.
you're saying that progressive liberalism,
Yes.
international or transnational progressive liberalism, is a great threat to the nation state?
yes.
Or to national sovereignty?
Yeah, opposite the Christian and conservative approach. But I hope so. We all agree with that because all of the participants maybe think the same thing. So, like we believe the same way of Europe, the Christian and conservative way. So our side is based on Christian value, culture. It is an anti-communist way, believes in families. Maybe we are focused on families and importance of national identity. And the other side, we can see multiculturalism, then you said, migration, and against nation states, against Poland, against Hungarians' opinion and Hungarian interests, and against the Christian values too.
Great.
So,
No, I will. I just want to add right now something, compliment.
Actually, that's about the threats, additional
Yes.
threats.
Right.
Super fast. I mean, first, I think there are some. I mean, because the threat is global and international. Those who are concerned about sovereignty have literally the whole world and the whole capital that I can see against them. But there is another one, and that's really not something that anybody in Europe, I think, is paying attention to, and that's China. East Central Europe is the next stop very clearly, and it's not just Fudan University. China is going to step in with infrastructure money, when America under Biden withdrew from the 3 Seas region. I think we will wake up when they are already at the Baltic. Their interest is now in Hungary, which is landlocked, so maybe it's not attracting much attention. It's only being used to criticize Orban for talking to China. Obviously, they are already at the Black Sea almost. They are in Afghanistan, so they finished Asia. They're finishing the Middle East. It's now East Central Europe. I am sure that they're going to be interested in investments in Poland, which is very hungry for infrastructure investment. It's going to be at the Baltic. From the Baltic, you go to the North Sea, to the North Atlantic, and you have the US surrendered. So I think that is a real threat. And of course, we have congenitally perverse Russia, which doesn't understand they'll be the main course. They simply enjoy the show that's anti-Western in nature, and that's kind of their foreign policy, being anti-Western. So I think there is a threat. I just wanted to throw an
Thank
answer.
you. And before I go to Francesco and maybe ask him the same question about China and Italy, I just want to add or build on what you said, because it reminds me of something. I have it right here. Matthias Carlson, who is with us today, had said at the NatCon Rome conference, he said, the new globalist postmodernist left poses a real threat to everything that is good, beautiful, and meaningful in our lives and our civilization. And I thought that was very important to bring up, because, as I said, one of the many external threats, I think, is, in addition to some of these global economic actors, is this transnational left, this movement that both of you have pointed to. But now, Francesco, what do you think about these external threats, these non-EU threats to national sovereignty from the Italian perspective? Is it China, or is it something else, or some other entity?
I think talking about national sovereignty and also China, we have to keep in mind one word, and this word is freedom. We have every day to keep in mind, in this moment especially, the importance of the freedom. Because freedom is exactly what they don't have in China. Because China is not a democracy. It's maybe not good to say it, but it is the reality. And we have to remember it. And we have to remember that the freedom is the base of our values. We have to remember that the health, the importance of life, as conservative, we underline every day the importance of life, from abortion to the end of life. And so we understand and we know how it's important to save the life of the people. But in the same time, we can put in a competition the concept of freedom and the concept of health. And we have to keep in mind these kind of things. And before answering your question, I want to underline that we are living in a very specific moment. In our country, in Italy, also to go to work, you need the Green Pass, the European Green Pass. The idea of the European Green Pass is made to move from all over Europe. I have the vaccine, I'm in favor of the vaccine, but in the same times, I underline how it's important to defend the freedom. And if someone don't want to have the vaccine, or if someone want to work without the Green Pass, we have to defend this right of the constitutional rights. And it's quite important, because if we don't defend this constitutional right, we're going to finish like Turkmenistan and Tajikistan, that are the two only countries in the world where there is an obligation. And I think that the freedom is the base of our democracy. And answer about China, I think that there are two threats and two danger country for Europe in the future. One is China, and the other probably is Turkey. And when I talk about China, we have to say that the Chinese economy is entering Europe. We have some friends from the Balkan area here. Can we talk about Montenegro? Can we talk about the trap of the debt who happens in Montenegro, where the Chinese give some money to the Montenegro to build an earthquake? They didn't have money to repay, and they're buying a country. But we can also talk about the situation in Greece, in Piraeus. We can talk about Afghanistan, of course, but we can also talk about our country, a Western European country. And I make you an example. We talk a lot about environment. I think that environment is a very important topic, and I'm in favor of the vision of green conservatism made by Roger Scruton. But it's not possible that an entrepreneur from Italy or from Germany or from Spain, from all over Europe, has to produce, for example, plastic, and he has to maintain some strict rules and produce plastic or other issue to respect some rules made by the European Union, and sell this product in the European Union market and pay a lot of tax because of that. And in the same time, we import product from China where they don't respect the right of the people, they don't respect the right of the law, and in the same time, they don't respect the environment issue. And we can talk about another important issue, and after I conclude with Turkey. We can talk about, for example, what is happening in the south of Italy or in Spain, where our farmers, they can produce any more olive oil, or the cost of producing, for example, orange or lemon is too high for them, because we import olive oil, we import orange, we import lemon from North Africa, from Tunisia. We don't know what we are eating, and the European Union pay the farmers from the North Africa, and in the same time, the farmers from Italy, the farmers from Spain, they didn't receive money and are in a worse situation. And when I talk about Turkey, I want to underline how the Mediterranean area and the North Africa is strategic for the future of Europe. In this moment, we are having the conference on the future of Europe until the next year. I'm part of the scientific committee of the Italian government, and our government is work a lot on, is not only this government, but is, of course, from right to left, is a scientific committee, but we are working a lot on the Balkan area, because the Balkan area was historically part of our influence, but now China and Turkey are inside the Balkan area. And the same happens in Libya, the same happens in North Africa and in the Mediterranean area, where some power countries that until 10 years ago, until 20 years ago, weren't there, now they are inside of the Mediterranean area. If we don't talk about the future of the Balkan area, if we don't talk about the future of the Mediterranean area, it's a big threat, it's a big problem for our European Union, not only from Italy or for Greece or for Spain or France. It's a problem for everyone. We have to talk and discuss about this kind of issue, because the risk is going to happen in another Afghanistan in the north of Africa. And we see it, and I really finish, we see it with the migrants. In our country arrive every day thousands of migrants in Lampedusa, in the south of Italy. And this is not a problem of us, it's a problem of everyone. Because when a migrant enters in Italy, he enters in the European Union. He can go in Germany, he can go in Sweden, he can go in Hungary, he can go all over. The same is with the Balkan route. So that's why we have to defend our borders.
Thank you. I want to give the audience an opportunity to ask questions, if there are any questions. Any hands? There are. Microphone for the gentleman in the back, please. Mike, I think the microphone needs to be turned on.
No.
No? Great. Thank you for an outstanding panel, and I was hoping to ask, how do we restore nation-state sovereignty in a world where every single age cohort after the Maastricht Treaty has been indoctrinated into a worldview that sees Europe as the answer to everything? They've worked through education to brainwash the younger generations, and it runs very deep to the point where Anna and I discussed at one occasion that this was more an ideology than a system of belief. It's a very comprehensive set of ideas that have answers to everything. If you ask anyone in Europe under 25, they've been taught that Europe means peace and prosperity. So how do you build an alternative to that nation-state sovereignty when the other side is indoctrinated?
Would you like a response from each of the panelists? Anyone? Anyone want to take that?
I think the only I think the only way is to first of all, not to let the European Union interfere in the education of nation states, and that's really something to hold the line on. What's happening in Poland right now with the rainbow rights and the invasion of the Polish, actually in Hungarian, the emphasis on the value of family and therefore not changing the curriculum so that everybody would think that sexual rights trump the rights of the parents to raise the children. I think that's the first place, and in general, I think Melissa said it over lunch. We're probably looking at building new institutions, and I don't think they should be European institutions. I think they should be national institutions. And having languages like Bulgarian, Hungarian, Polish, Lithuanian, it really helps. Not that many people are conversant in them, so it will be a little bit of a delay in attacking. But I think that at the level of the European Union, countries have to support one another, not let one another fall one by one, hoping that you won't be the next victim. And yes, propose some legislation that will allow for the creation of independent educational institutions. I don't think there is another way. But then we have people like Francesco. I mean, he's like 12, and he's okay.
Thanks,
So,
Ádám.
you know, there's hope.
We'll go first to Dr. Colm here, microphone for her, and then to gentleman over there. Over here first, please.
Right, thank you very much. So yes, sorry, Alan Riley, Atlantic Council. I just wanted to focus on China, because what concerns me when I talk to a lot of governments and officials across the continent is the lack of understanding. It's not just a bit of the Chinese buying a few properties. When you're basically getting in the Chinese companies, you're buying influence. The Chinese Communist Party is buying influence and buying leverage. What I worry about is that, okay, I can see all the questions with the European Union, but at the end of the day, you know, every single European state on the continent at least is a member state. You have votes in Brussels, whatever. You have no votes in Beijing. And the scale of the potential influence and the actual influence, and if you look at already the direction, I'll give you one example. If you look at a lot of Central Eastern European and Southern European energy companies and the building of stakes in strategic energy and telecommunications companies, this is a far more direct threat to national security than any directive you can imagine from Brussels. And I think there is, one of my real concerns is that everybody is banging on about Brussels over here. And meanwhile, through the back door, Beijing is having a much, much, much bigger influence. And it's a creeping influence, and you don't know that they've got you around the throat until their hands, you can feel their hands on your windpipe. And I think there's a real issue which we haven't really addressed. It should, you know, okay, Brussels, but Beijing first, is my view. I would like to know what the panel think of that.
Very quick response.
Yeah, the thing is, we underestimate China. We have to stop to underestimate everyone. We think every time that we are the best, and we think every time that the other countries and the other civilizations think like us. This is a big mistake. Yeah. The Chinese, they don't think like us. We have to stop Western European people to do the foreign politics. We see it in Afghanistan, we see it in many things, but we don't have to underestimate China. China is an old civilization. They are older than the Roman Empire. They are a very old civilization. So they are dangerous probably because they have a strong cultural issue. And so that's why we have to talk about China in a serious way. And I think this mistake from Western European people, we do the same with you, with Hungarian people, with Polish people. As Western European people, sometimes when we talk about Hungary, when we talk about Poland, we try to judge you and not understand what is happening in your country. This is a big mistake, in my opinion. We have to respect every country, and we have to talk about every country, not with our eyes, but also with the eye of these countries.
Ádám, would you like to say something?
Yeah, just one point, yeah. And because we talked about the challenges of the world, China, President of the United States, migration, and anything else, Turkey, and so on. And we can see the world develops rapidly, and we have several crises all over the years, economic crisis, COVID thing, and the others. And the Union was not able to react these problems or these kind of questions, or was not able to answer the questions, or not able to react and make solutions. So what I think we need strong member states, And after that, we need a strong, united European Union who can be on a stage next to these power states. So that's my point. And just one more thing. And that's why the Hungarians, and maybe we can agree with that too, absolutely reject the ever closer union, because it cannot be a solution or than expected, or I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you, Kusunam. Unless you're dying to say something, I'd like to go to Dr. Cohn. She has a question? Yeah? Okay.
Thank you very much. This session is on national sovereignty, and maybe I have overheard it, but then I apologize. But we have not heard the term subsidiarity principle. And I think this is the only solution to grab our sovereignty on the local and regional level back and avoid this one-size-fits-all top-down. So what is your take on that, and how can we support the subsidiarity principle again?
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning it, by the way. That was next. Had we another 15 minutes, we would have gone on to it. The challenge of returning to principles like subsidiarity in a world of economic calculation. Thank you, Barbara. Would you like to take that one?
Absolutely. Just as in education, devolution of power is the answer. And we need to, during the first panel, words such as courage were mentioned. I saw some terrifically entertaining performances by Professor Legutko in the European Parliament. I really, really enjoyed them, including when Guy Verhofstadt was accusing the Eastern Europeans of various stripes of not being compliant enough and saying that it's only the governments he doesn't like, not the people. Professor Legutko reminded him that unfortunately Snow White and the seven dwarfs were not the ones who voted for those officials, but it was in fact the communities that sent their representatives to Brussels. So again, it takes 800 Professor Legutkos, I think, would be great. That would be a start. I think people have to talk back. I don't think Mrs. von der Leyen should be the only one who holds on to her microphone, and when Nigel Farage is waving the English flag as a punishment, his microphone is turned off. This is absolutely outrageous. It's a clown world. It's standing on its head. How dare they? How dare they? So I think that a really good place to start is for everybody who is in Brussels to remind those people who works for whom. That's a really good start.
Very good.
So,
Ádám, would you like to respond to Dr. Cohn
Yeah,
on the principles of subsidiarity?
Yes, I can just agree with you. Seriously. Okay. And maybe just one word. I think it can be an important tool for your question too, the democratic empowerment, which is a really important pillar of the national sovereignty, I think. And maybe fortunately in Hungary we have this kind of tool. So I think we cannot talk about this. The democratic empowerment is a really, really important pillar.
Well, thank you. We're out of time, but I cannot ignore Matthias Carlson. You have a quick comment or question?
Can we have a microphone?
Thank you very much. I'm Matthias Carlson from the think tank Oikos in Sweden. Anna mentioned earlier John Fontaine, his book Sovereignty or Submission, a book that we recently translated into Swedish. And so I wanted to bring up the subject of multilateralism and how it could be both an opportunity but also a threat to national sovereignty. Myself, I'm a part of the International Parliamentary Union, who is like the parliament's equivalent to the UN. So I often go to New York and the UN headquarters and I take part in negotiations there. And I see that the whole structure of those organizations are built to undermine national sovereignty, and they've been taken over by left liberals for many decades. And I've seen that countries like US, especially under Trump, decided to withdraw their participation in order not to be complicit, I guess, or attacked. But I can see two ways for conservatives to address this issue. How the NGOs and the multilateral organizations are undermining national sovereignty we could either withdraw or we can try to cooperate closer and try to build a resistance also within those organizations. And it would be interesting to hear the views of the panel on what would be the best strategy to tackle that kind of backdoor threat against national sovereignty.
Excellent question, but can you each limit your response to 1 or 2 lines?
Withdraw.
Nice. Adam?
Same.
Withdraw. And
I
Francesco?
mean, we tried what you're describing. This is what got us here. We tried to be nice and talk. It's not working out. So withdraw and take away their power.
Time for nice is over, isn't it? Right? Francesco, final word. Withdraw? You agree? Withdraw. Thank you, panelists.
And you're right on China. I'm sorry. Don't
round
let
of-
the Germans negotiate for you.
Thank you. A round of applause, please, for our panelists.